And welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 292. Today is a feedback session. So we've had a couple of people send in images. We're going to be looking at them and deciding how they might be improved and what the blind spots were of the people who sent them in. So we're live here on YouTube. Leave a message. Let me know you're here and we can make a start. Yes, and welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 292. So yes, we're live here on YouTube. If you haven't been watching live, that is, then leave a comment. Let me know you're here. Let me know what the weather's doing. All their usual kind of bits and pieces. And, you know, if you also happen to be tuned in live, then click the like button. That's always useful as well. Sometimes when we get enough likes, YouTube shows this to a few other people, and we occasionally get new people join us as well. And actually, if you're watching the recorded version, you can also hit like that. That also helps the algorithms too. So today is a feedback session. So Viji and Gunilla have sent in images, so we'll talk about that in a minute. But I can see that we have got a couple of people in live chatting already. So let's make a start. So Robert joins us, says howdy all from a stormy North Texas. And Lisa says, hello from a hot and sunny Maryland. Whereas Gunilla says it's hi from a sunny but windy Orland. Janet is hi from a warm Mississauga. April says, greetings from a sunny and warm day in Long Island, New York. And Susan says, hi everyone, it's wet and windy here in Kakubri. Not very much like summer. Very similar here in Castle Douglas. Wet, windy, miserable. Hint of sunshine for 5 minutes while we were sitting in the garden this morning, and then it vanished again. But yes, kind of grey and miserable here. So yes, that's kind of where we're at today. So let's okay. So welcome, and let's kind of make a start. So what we're talking about today then is a feedback session, a critique session. So what we've had is Viji and Gunilla have both sent in images with the idea of getting some feedback on it. And feedback is on your own photography is one of the most important ways to improve your photography. I mean, obviously, the most important way is to go out and take photos. Take lots of photos. Keep taking lots of photos. But not just take the photos. Look at your photos and start trying to work out which ones work, which ones don't, why they work, why they don't. What can you learn from the process? And as I've always said, each photo that you take that works, great, you get the praise for it, but you don't tend to learn very much. It's the photos that don't work that you learn the most from. So you need to embrace that. Take lots of photos. Get a lot wrong, learn a lot. But of course, sometimes we are blind to our own images. We see things, or we don't understand how we are filtering what we see, I think is an awful lot of the problem. Very often we take photos where we are so focused on what we think we're taking that we don't notice other things that are actually interfering with the narrative. And when it comes to taking, if it's just photos for yourself, then that doesn't really matter. But if you're ever taking photos and you want somebody else to see them, whether that's because it's put into competitions or whether it's because you're sharing it on social media, you are trying to communicate something. So the question is, what is it you are trying to communicate and how well are you doing it? And most of us never, ever, ever ask these fundamental questions. We just go, oh, there's a pretty picture, and we put it up thinking that it's obvious what we're communicating. And it isn't always. Or we are communicating some of it, but not the kind of extent of what we thought we would try to communicate. And at that point, our own blind spots are getting in the way. And so having somebody else who can give you genuine feedback on your own photography is absolutely invaluable. And I don't just say this, for the sake of it. I know from my own experience that when I started out in photography, I was merrily going along and I was improving at a certain rate. But it wasn't until I started getting genuine feedback from other photographers on my photography that my photography took a major leap forward. And I don't think I would have ever made that leap, or as big a leap, or alternatively, it would have taken many, many, many years longer to get to the stage that I am now if I hadn't been able to get that kind of feedback. So this is why I do the feedback sessions. This is one of the only places on the internet, possibly in the world, where you can get free feedback on your photos. There are plenty of places that do portfolio reviews, but it will usually cost you several pounds, dollars, euros, rupees, whatever, in order to get them. What else have we got? Oh, Sandy joins us and says, good morning from a cool and cloudy Alberta. And Roland says, hey guys, from an average London. You see, might be average for London, but for anybody who doesn't live in London, nobody knows what your average is, because your average in Helsinki is going to be different from your average in London, is different from your average in Marrakesh. So, and we also know from experience as well that a hot and humid Scotland is positively chilly for Viji in Chennai. So, right, okay. Let's make a little start then. So, although, well, Viji hasn't joined us yet, but I was planning on starting with Viji. So, or maybe I should just swap this round. Maybe I should go with Gunilla first. Gunilla's here. Viji might join us later. So, yes, okay, I will swap round and I will. These are live. These are my own podcasts. I'm not restricted to what somebody else is imposing on me. I can swap the order if I wish. Who's going to tell me off? Me? Right, okay, yes. Laughing at my own jokes. Okay, where should we go? Let me... A little bit of shuffling around here. Okay, so that's over there, that's there. I've got this up. So let's make a start with Gunilla then. And what I shall do is do that and then flip this over here. And what we have then is we have Gunilla's picture. And Gunilla says, right, now I need to scroll down because I had a different... My sheet was set up with Viji. Gunilla says, this photo was taken on the 1st of May in the city square, where a celebration took place with live music, radio broadcasts, flea market and auction for goodwill. In the centre is a couple, and in the background there are other people. It was in the middle of the day and the light was very harsh. What could I have done differently? Is it a clear subject or is it too busy? Could I crop it to improve it? Now, what Gunilla has done here, she has actually sent me in a slightly cropped version of the photo, but she also sent me the raw photo. So what I think I will do is I think I will bring up the raw photo so that we can get a better look at what options we're playing with here. And just as a very quick thing, I've noticed we've got sort of blown highlights in her hair, whether we can recover, and that's very bright, this bit here, whether we can recover anything or not. Let's just hit auto. Okay, that gives us a brief sense of, I think, probably the best we're going to do. I'll just click open on that. And now, let's just fill the screen. And the very first thing I would do, just for the sake of it, is I would just straighten this slightly. One of the things we notice is there's a slight tilt to the right on this. And if you're not sure about where you should be, what are you lining up with? Because usually when we're talking about keeping something straight, we look for a straight horizon. So if you're looking out to sea, if you're looking across the fields, there's a straight horizon. Here we can't see the horizon in the background. And because of the kind of perspective, some bits are flat and straight here, but other bits are maybe not quite so. So what we do at that point actually is lock onto the verticals. And what we notice here is a vertical like this lamppost is leaning slightly. The little bell tower here is leaning slightly. The buildings are leaning slightly. And all these things tell us that it's just leaning to the right a little bit. So actually what you could do if you want, if you've got Photoshop, you just click on the little ruler bits over here and you can drag it along a line. And maybe we sort of stick it next to the lamppost there. And then I can rotate it and just make sure it's lining up. I can also actually just use the straight lines that are already here, and maybe the building over on the right, we just kind of line that up and we do something like that. And pretty much that now feels a little bit straighter. So I'll just hit enter there. Okay, that helps you get rid of that little kind of slightly OCD thing of feeling that it's slightly left or right. What else have we got here? Lisa says go for it, Kim. April says, where are the leaves? May and no leaves. Ah, yes, but what you have to remember here, yes, so Gunilla said this was taken on the 1st of May, April saying no leaves on the 1st of May. But maybe this is because this is in Åland, and Åland is on a little bunch of isles between Finland and Sweden. So it's quite possible that the season is slightly later there. being that bit further north. Yes, Gunilla said this is the north. Check out April. You're in Long Island, New York. You are considerably further south than, I mean, even if you Nova Scotia. One of the things I remember, Nova Scotia in Canada is actually on a level with Paris, okay, in France, and then Scotland is, another many hundred miles north of that, and then Ireland is another 100 miles or so north than that. So. Meg's joined us. A few people saying hello to Meg as well. Okay, distraction about why there's no leaves on the trees in the 1st of May. Let's get back to then this picture. What is that? So what we have here then is a very busy scene. And the question then becomes, what are we trying to convey in this scene? And really, the focus does tend to be this couple. But is there anything particularly interesting about this couple which is really wanting to grab our attention? We get drawn primarily to this guy's face because partly he's in the centre of the picture, but partly because our eyes and our brains are primed to notice faces more than anything else. Only got to look at last month's pareidolia challenge to know that. And he's slightly in the foreground, but what we've got with the woman that he's with is the back of her head. We've got an expression on his face. So if this is the story, if this really is the story about the man and his reaction to, or is he looking at her because he looks sort of slightly concerned, or maybe he's just trying to, who knows, maybe slightly deaf, trying to hear what she's saying. Maybe he's listening intently to what she's saying. Maybe he's asked her a question, he's waiting for a reaction. We don't really know. All we can see is expression. We can't see hers. So if this is the story, then basically this is where you need to be cropped, okay? Because if it's all about his expression, we need to be able to see his face. However, what you've done is in which case you should have zoomed in. What you've done though is you've taken a photo of the whole market. And at that point, this couple is just one couple in the market. So where is the story? Where are there stories? There's actually different stories. I mean, over here, there's a story of there's a little child here sitting in a pram, got some sunglasses put on at a slightly funny angle. While looks like a parent or something leaning over with a hand here, somebody looking this way, people in conversation. Yeah, well, it's a bit of a story, but it's not too much. People, backs of heads, not a lot going on there. Stuff going on here. I mean, basically, it's people milling around. And so the next thing is where is our eye drawn to? Now, when you are looking for a story, there are 2 or 3 different ways that our eyes get drawn to particular places. One of these is faces, as I've said, we get drawn to. Another is where the focal point, where something is focused, rather. So if you have a narrow depth of field, so that only part of it's in focus and the rest of it isn't, we will get drawn to the part that's sharpest. Okay, now in this case, this is, a deep depth of field. So it's sharp in the foreground, it's sharp in the background. So focal depth isn't making any difference. The next thing then is the notion of bright and dark, contrast. Where's the contrast? Now, in this case, what happens? I'm going to show a little trick. Actually, I've not shown for a long time. I'm going to just duplicate this layer, and then I'm going to blur it, filter. In fact, actually, before I even blur it, I'm going to rotate it so that we can completely change our view of it. So if I go to Edit, Transform, Rotate 180 degrees, and then I go Filter, Blur, I'll go Gaussian Blur, right? And what I want to do is blur this so much that we don't really know what it is we're looking at anymore. So I'll just go a little touch more there, like that. Now, what this does is this enables us to see what's catching our eye. And what tends to be catching our eye at this point, if I just grab that, is we've got a kind of a light patch there. We've got the light patch there. We've got a light patch here. Okay. We're not now that I think might be the man's head or the woman's hair. Actually, I think that's the woman's hair. But you can see that actually, if we kind of sort of slightly screwing up our eyes, it's these brighter patches that are kind of the bits that are grabbing our attention. Okay, but none of those things are actually what's interesting here. So really what's grabbing our attention is probably this bright box down here, the highlights in her hair, these little white patches here. And these are drawing our attention away from what it is which. So again, if you were even trying to say that it's this couple are the key point of the picture, these things, this bright little kind of side cupboard thing, it is dragging our attention away from it. So where are the bright patches? The bright patches draw our eyes. So that's not helping us either. Then there's another thing, which is what makes a difference, which is the notion of leading lines. Where are the lines drawing us? So in this case, I'll just put a fresh layer on. So there are certain lines, like if we take, this is quite a strong line here, the edge of this canopy here. So if we follow that down, that basically points us to him. Okay. If we've got the top of the building here, which is also kind of pointing to him. But then this here is creating quite a strong line, which just goes to the middle. This here is creating quite a strong line, which is taking us up that way. This one is taking up this way. This one is taking us out that way. Tops of the roofs, taking us over here. The edge of the thing, taking us down here. And so what we see here is it's kind of confusing. It's not giving us anywhere specifically to draw our eye to. The most it's doing is this line here is drawing us a bit towards him. And maybe this bit coming down here, possibly this bit. So we are still getting drawn to this bit. But like I say, unless you're actually zoomed in, there's not much of a story going on there. And so ultimately, then Gunilla, I think the problem is with this is it's about understanding what is it we want to try and get across. We've got a busy scene, but there's no flow through the scene. Our eyes go to the couple, our eyes go to the man, but when we're zoomed out like this, we're not overly getting the expression. We can't see the woman's face. We don't know what the relationship is. And then we get distracted by these bright patches over here, which are drawing our eye away. We've got leading lines taking us in lots of different directions. There's busyness, but no focus. And so ultimately, the photo just doesn't feel satisfying, I think, to anybody else. Now, for you, if it may be fine. It might be a case of you were down at the busy market, where at the same time, you were hearing the sounds, you were smelling the smells, you had all the noises, the feel, the mood, the atmosphere of the place. Maybe you were looking around, maybe you were finding some interesting bits to buy for your home or for gifts. And you have all these memories and feelings and emotions that go with it. So this photo then ends up as a gateway to all those emotions. And if you happen to know the people, the couple in there, then even more so. But to go back to this idea that the point of photography beyond yourself is the idea to communicate something to somebody else as effectively as you can. What is it you're trying to communicate in this photo? And well, again, you could say, quick little thing on Facebook. Hey, I was at the market. And you'll get a couple of people go, yeah, that's great. Nice market. Oh, I think I've been there. But if you were to put it into a competition, if you were to put it into PhotoCrowd or Guru Shots or one of these online things, there just isn't enough in there to really know what the story is about and why we should be looking. Like I say, the biggest story you've got is basically the expression on this guy's face. But if the story was all about the expression on this guy's face and not about the rest of the market, then you would zoom in here, and this is where your story would be. And then a picture like this, you could put into a competition called reactions or expressions or something like that. So I hope that makes sense, Gunilla. It's in that sense of, I mean, I can see exactly where you were coming from. I can see, you're at this busy place, you pull out the camera, you go snap, but then without having a clear understanding of what it was precisely you were wanting to capture, it then means that we're just trying to rescue something afterwards. And ultimately, it's never going to be the most satisfying of photos. You'll get something, it's a gateway to memories, but it's not going to be that really powerful photo that you would hope to be able to, you might have been aiming for. So hope that all makes sense. But thank you for sending it in, Gunilla. Because I think that's allowed us to kind of really explore the notions of, it's what I said, it's not just the photos that work, it's the photos that don't work where we really get to learn. And in this case, that being able to just revise over the fact that point of focus, depth of focus, leading lines, bright patches versus dark patches, all these are the kind of things, where is our eye being drawn? And if in an ideal photo, then we try and line it up such that the thing that we want people to focus on, that's the bit that's sharp, where maybe everything else is slightly blurred. That's the bit that's brighter, where everything else is slightly darker. That's the bit where the leading lines are drawing our attention to. And then if we're doing all that, then the point that everything they all come together, then there needs to be something to reward us. That's the key critical point of what we're trying to convey. And like I say, that could be, an expression, it could be a mood, it could be a colour scheme, it could, whatever it is, but you have to be clear about what it is you're looking to express. So thank you for sending that in, and I hope that all makes sense. Right, where are we? Okay, Sandra's joined us and says, hello everybody from a warm but overcast Birmingham. Gunilla says, thanks, and Sandra says, Susan says, hi Sandra, slightly jealous of your warmth. Yeah, given the fact that we are well into June now, it still does kind of feel like late March, early April weather here, even though we have leaves on the trees. Okay, right, let's close that. And so, little quick reminder, if you're finding these podcasts useful, interesting, entertaining, then buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is one of the ways you can help. Now, the other thing is, of course, if you are wanting to put your own photos in for critique, and we will have another critique section in 2 weeks' time, then submit them to the Kim Ayres podcast @gmail.com. I set that one up especially so that my own normal email box isn't getting too full. So that one's now, I think most of you are starting to get the hang of it, but anybody who's new, kimayrespodcast@gmail.com. So send me your images for feedback and let me know what it is you think your sticking points are, what it is where you'd like to try and kind of improve it. But also for challenges as well. But at the end of this podcast, we now have a topic for this month, what I'll be discussing next week, and then setting the challenge for. So I'll tell you a bit more about that at the end of the podcast. So stick around for that. But also, if you're putting in for the challenges, same one, kimayrespodcast@gmail is the best place to send me stuff. If you're used to sending me stuff to my regular email, that's okay. But convenience-wise, it's easier for me that way. Right. Okay. What else? I think that's kind of where we need to be. Oh, yeah, a quick update of Smug points. Yes, so Smug points, that's right. So it was Janet who won hands down last the end of the May. Basically, we didn't we didn't have so many podcasts on May. I was off doing other things, so everything came down to the Pareidolia challenge, and Janet won both the crowd vote, the viewers vote, and my vote. So she ended up with 70 Smug points. Viji and Marcy came in joint second with 35 each, and April and Susan came in joint third with 30 each. So basically that meant Janet then got to choose the topic for this month. So I'll tell you all about that a little bit later. Where are we? Sandy says weather update. Sorry, I've got a wire hanging in front of the screen just there. So it's now sunny, and that basically sums up the weather in Alberta. Okay, constantly changing. A little bit like Scotland. There's an old thing they say with Scotland, which is if you don't like the weather, hang around half an hour and you'll get another one. Right, okay, so what we're going to now, it doesn't look like Viji's able to join us this week, but I do know she will catch up afterwards. So now, what Viji has done, Viji sent me 3 photos, in fact, but they are all related. Oh, hang on a sec, I am missing one of them. Oh, okay. Bear with me one moment, then. What I will have to do is, it looks like I may well have inadvertently deleted one at some point. So all I should need to do is go here, click download on that, and change that to that. Ooh, hold on. Change, where are we? What's happening? Please bear with me. Okay, no, not episode 286. I want to go to 28292. Oh, my filing system is appalling, I have to say. Oh no, that is there. So why is that there and not showing up here? That is so strange. Okay, let's just save that. Ah, it's there. Okay, I don't know. Forgive me. Right, okay, so, what I will do then, let me show you the pictures that Viji has sent. So, well, first of all, Viji says, I am submitting 3 images for the critique segment. Your expert advice on how to improve would be greatly appreciated. So, the 3 photos she has sent are, first of all, we have this one. So we've got a pair of sandals. Then we have a pair of footprints in the sand. And then we have footprints disappearing up away into the sand. Okay, so we have these 3 photos. And Viji says, first of all, did I manage the depth of field effectively across these shots? How is the framing and visual balance? Does the angle and lines in the sand naturally guide the viewer's eye? And 3, can these be submitted for a triptych challenge? Do these photos have a cohesive narrative, especially with the colour and lighting consistency? Is the narrative strong enough? Now, that's the key bit, right? So what we have then is we have these 3 photos. We've got, well, the thing is you can put them in kind of any order you want, but the order that naturally comes to me is that we start with the sandals, then I would say we go to the footprints, and then we go to the footprints disappearing. So it feels like a pair of feet have slipped the sandals off and then started walking into the distance. Okay, so now I can't remember when I did a podcast specifically on triptychs, which I think was roughly about a year ago. But of course that was a year ago. So reminders. When you're doing a triptych, so a triptych is 3 photos which are usually displayed together, and you have a narrative that crosses the 3 of them, so that they should work individually, but they should also work as a cohesive whole. So very often it allows you sometimes a story. And this notion of what Viji is doing here is going from sandals to footprints walking away, is creating a story. Now, 2 aspects to this. The first aspect is the notion that we need to have that each of the photos needs to be working in their own right. The second is how they work together. So let's go for the first one. So if I go to here, and what we'll notice straight away is, well, the thing is actually about all 3 of them is they all have a different cut. This one's got a slight greenish, darker thing. This one's got a paler, yellowish. This one's got a more slightly magenta shift, but it's darker sand as well. So part of the problem we immediately end up with is that none of the photos are consistent in their colour scheme. Now, the next thing with with this one is, where's the focal point and where should the focal point be? Now, actually, if we zoom in, it's focused nice and sharp just on the strap for in the foreground and the one closest to us. By the time we get to the little toe grip, it's starting to go out of focus on there, and then much more out of focus on the end of the toe grip. So is this the best place for the focal point? I would have said actually that if you were going to do a focal point and the sandals are pointing forwards, so what we're trying to do is almost have that sense of the momentum moving forward. What we should really do is maybe have the focal point closer to the front sandal, the front of the front sandal even. Or probably better for something like this would have been to have a narrower aperture and a deeper depth of field and actually have the sandals in focus from front to back, I think, with something like this. Then we've got quite a lot of space up the top, feels very tightly cropped at the bottom. So as an individual photo, you would maybe want to, what will I do this? I'll just do this on content aware fill rather than generative expand. But you would maybe give it a little bit of space to breathe at the back. You do want slightly more ahead than it behind, but not a huge amount. So as a standalone photo, what I'd be more tempted to do is have, of course, a bit of space around it, something like that. You've also got the problem of the fact that the sand feels very dark. So if we would kind of bring the sand up a bit like that, although we then end up with a problem where the sand is looking better, and now at this, the sand is kind of tying in more with the other pictures, but we've blown out the sandals. So ultimately then, we have to kind of see that, oh, Viji's joined us. I see that. Oh, welcome, Viji, just onto your picture. So you can catch up on the other bits. So the key point here then is, first of all, I think if, that slightly different crop ratio, but also need to make an attention to lightness, get the exposure right so the sand doesn't feel so dark compared to the sandals. And I think playing around with that is one of the things on that particular photo. On this one, what we have is, again, a little bit more space needed. The heel is just clipped out there. And so you probably really want to have something a little bit more like, okay, let's go back to content aware fill again. I would have, given the fact that you've got space to the left and you've got space above, a little bit to the right and a little bit more below would give you a better ratio for that. Obviously, the heel would be kicked in. The generative bit here has decided to just drag that. But the other problem we have here is that it's in focus primarily at the back of the heel, and by the time we get to the toes, it's gone out of focus. So on something we're looking straight down at, that feels kind of too shallow. So I would have gone again for a narrower aperture, try and make sure it's in focus from top, front to back. This one also perhaps in focus from front to back. This one then, although it's designed to be out of focus, we've then got a problem with the fact that, well, where should we, is it better to have these ones in the foreground in focus, or might we have been better to have these ones up here in focus to draw our eye further into the photo? Okay, so each of the photos individually is maybe struggling a bit to really achieve what you want. But the main problems that we have, though, is if we're talking triptych, is the idea that the three of them don't sit together as a cohesive whole. And the very first thing that strikes us is the ratio. This one is portrait. This one is landscape. This one's landscape, but it's tilted. And so what we don't have is a kind of a consistency. And if you're trying to make a triptych, what you have to imagine is that the three pictures are side by side, maybe literally. So what we might do, just to sort of give you a sense of here, if we were to take this photo, and then what I will do is I will go to edit, image, canvas size, and I will just make it, go to percent, and we'll make it 300% wider. So that means we could have bump, bump, bump all together, but I'm going to anchor it over on the left. So what we see here then is that we have that. Now, if we would sort of divide that equally, then that would look something like, roughly about that. Okay, so then what we do is we take your footprints and we put them in here. and I'll Control T that. Now, obviously, it's the wrong aspect ratio. That then is also, you see, again, in an ideal, if you were going to go for this, then what you would want to have is you would want to have the footprints, I would have said, in the same kind of ratio as the sandals. Okay, so the same kind of angle. So maybe you're kind of looking at something more like that. And then if we were to have them about the same size, it would look something like that into the same space. But you can see that what we would need is more sand filled in here, more sand filled in there. So in fact, I'll tell you what, if I just go back to here and we go to, we'll just kind of do that. But then what we'll do is we'll create the shape that we were talking about here, roughly kind of that. It's not going to be absolutely exact, but and then do the content aware fill and hit that. Then hopefully, yeah, okay, not ideal, but doesn't really matter. We're just trying to get that sense here. So if I delete that, place that here, and then just drag that in a bit. So you can see that that now feels like it matches that bit a bit better. But then we come on to the third one, which again, if I then paste it in here, we've now got the wrong crop ratio to it. So what we then have to do is, first of all, kind of make it the right size. Tell you what, let's just put, if I put this below this one, where are we? No, right, I'm looking in the wrong. Grab, drag, yes, so it's behind. But I can then take this and we can put that there-ish to give that sense of, here's the footprints going up. And here you see again, where it's in focus, this bit feels kind of a bit too tight. So ideally, you would have wanted that bit in focus up there with a little bit more space below. But the point is now, is that if we have the three of these together, it looks better if we got the right crop ratio, and it looks better if we've managed to line up these kind of footprints so that it's still matched in with the sandals and the static footprints. But we've also got this major problem of colour, okay, so that they are all different colour schemes. Now, one way around this potentially is if we went, say, for black and white. If I just take the hue saturation, put that up there and desaturate, then what we can see is that kind of gets around that problem. Now, but we still have all these different levels of light and dark. So what we end up having to do is really individually try and make all these different. So if I go to black and white here, don't know, where's the, we kind of take the reds down, but then, oof, I'm not even entirely sure quite what to do here. What we're trying to do is lighten up that sand, something like that. But if we're doing that, we would then need to play with the contrast a little bit more. Oh, that's not doing much. Okay, what if I drop that below there? Ooh, no. I'll take the bright, yeah, but I want the brightness up. Okay, doesn't really matter. The point I'm really trying to make is that even if we go black and white, what we've got is we've got difference. And it's just not the consistency. And I can play around with these for half an hour, trying to get as best as I can the consistency between them. But the problem is that the photos aren't really there in the first place. So ultimately, what we're talking about then, Viji, sorry, where are we? Not that one, that one, yes. Ultimately then, Viji, what we are talking about is, I love the concept. I think the concept's a great one, okay? Sandals removed from the feet, footprints in the sand, and then footprints disappearing. But if you are going to make it into a triptych, you've got to have the consistency between the three photos. And that means consistency on a number of levels. First of all, it means consistency in the crop ratio. Secondly, it means consistency in the light and darkness. Thirdly, it means consistency in the colour scheme, the colour tint to it, unless you're going completely black and white. But fourthly, then, that means consistency in texture and tonal range. And fifthly, what you need is you want some kind of consistency of story, so that the bare footprints maybe match up with the sandals, so that they would if you overlaid one on top of the other, they would sort of match. But then you've also got the footprints that are disappearing off into the distance somehow need to have that same mood and feel without losing the that narrative. So it's a tricky one. And so ultimately then, you're either looking at the photos as they are individually, in which case you've got to make sure you've given it enough room to breathe. How does each bit relate to the other? How's the composition sitting there? Or you are looking at how they relate to each other, in which case you've got to have that consistency all the way through. And ultimately, if you're doing a triptych, the idea is a good one, but you've got to have everything else in place in order to make it work. So I hope that helps, Viji. I hope that gives you a few ideas. And also, of course, to anybody else who's watching who would be considering such an idea. So, okay, that basically brings us to the end of that. So now what I'll do then is let's talk about what's coming up next week. So first of all, thank you to Viji and to Gunilla for sending in their images. Just double checking here. Yeah, okay, mostly it was hi Viji and glad you made it. Okay, so what we're talking about now then is what's coming up next week. Excuse me. So next week then is coming up this month even. So yes, so next week then is intentional camera movement. Okay, so the idea with intentional camera movement is where you essentially move the camera at the point you're going to click as the exposure happens. Okay, now generally speaking, practically everything tells us not to do that. When we're trying to take a photo, everything is about getting the camera as steady as possible so that we don't get camera blur. There's all this stuff about whether the subject is blurring or not, but actually one of the things we're always trying to avoid is the idea of camera blur. But intentional camera movement is all about deliberately creating camera blur, but not so that it just looks like a messy accident, but so that it actually looks creative. So we tend to move into the world of abstract very often with something like this, but it's how to do it creatively. So this was Janet's suggestion. So Janet, who won all the Smug points last month, she came up with the idea, what about intentional camera movement? ICM, very often abbreviated too. April says, this is a hard one. That is a hard one. And Lisa says, I'm so interested in learning this technique. Okay, cool. So next week I have to say, I don't have many photos of my own about intentional camera movement. It's not something I've done a lot of. I've done little bits of. I've got a couple of photos like that, but not enough to really do the podcast. So this week, part of my homework is I have to go out and try these things out as well, so that I can tell you what the pitfalls are and things, and to give you examples. So extra homework for me. Whoopee. So that's next week. The week after, then 2 weeks today, on the 21st of June, will be another feedback session. So if you think the feedback that I gave to Gunilla and to Viji was, useful, that you've started to learn something, think about your own photos. What photos have you got where you think a bit of feedback would be really useful? Start sending me your images now, and the first 3, maybe 4, I will include then in the podcast on the 21st. But then what's going to happen is, once I've shown you about the intentional camera movement next week, I will then set the challenge. So you will get the homework. You will get the chance to go out and do an intentional camera movement photo. And one of the things I found out already, and I'll talk more about next week, is these things are terrible for it. Because these things are automatically trying to make your image sharp and in focus. It doesn't like it when you deliberately try to make it out of focus. So I haven't worked out a way around that with this yet. I'll let you know if I do. But you might find this easier with a camera where you have control over the shutter speed. Okay. So that's really what we're up against then. So next week, intentional camera movement. Week after, feedback session. Week after that, the intentional camera movement challenge. And then there'll be another feedback session after that. Right. So I think that kind of, so if you want to send in images for the feedback session or for the challenge, then kimairspodcast@gmail.com. If you want to support the podcast, buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres. And the other thing, of course, is the fact that I now have the Substack newsletter. I'm busy working on that. Either tomorrow or Tuesday, I'll be sending out the next edition of the Substack newsletter. So that will be partly, I'll be giving a kind of heads up, what happened if you missed, in previous podcasts, what's coming up in future podcasts. But also I'll be talking a little bit about crowd and how it went. And the interactive photography event I did over Spring Fling. So I've got a little bit of writing about that. So if you'd like to sort of keep in touch with what I'm doing now, the Substack newsletter is absolutely free. You just go to kimairsphotography.substack.com. Completely free. I'm not hiding anything behind a paywall, and it will allow you to have things drop into your inbox, and then so if you happen to miss a podcast and you can't remember what's coming up, then you can always do a quick check in that as well. Okay, so I think that pretty much brings us to a conclusion. What have we got here? Viji says, I understand, Kim, that was doubtful, which is why I asked for your feedback. Thank you so much. I'm glad you found that useful, Viji. Lisa says, good one, Janet. Susan says, I've had a few tries at intentional camera movements, some with more success than the others. Yeah, it is a tricky one. It's not an easy one to do. It's a kind of low hit rate on that, or low hit rate. That's right. Roland says ND filter might come in handy. That's true if you're wanting to do it during the day. Doesn't tend to work quite so well with cameras, unless there's an ND filter option to stick over your camera, which I've not really seen yet. Then again, okay, Roland, bit of homework for you. You can come up with a gadget or device or work out how we can do ND filters on this and whether it will actually have any effect. I get the feeling you could probably work that one out. Gunilla says, I've tried ICM sometimes. And Roland says, thanks, Kim. Happy snapping, everybody. Right, okay. That brings us to the conclusion for this episode. I look forward to seeing you all next week. Don't forget to sign up for the newsletter. Next week, intentional camera movement. Have fun. See you all. Bye-bye.